Hi, everybody. Romy Hill here, Designs by Romy. And this is live for the last clue of my 2023 mystery shawl, Falderal. I have to warn you today, we have thunderstorms. And so my 5G is out, and I have to use my regular internet, which is incredibly slow. So I am afraid I may have some dropped frames, and the quality might not be all that great today, but I'm going to see what I can do. And if this doesn't work out, then I will definitely reschedule and I will do another live or I'll record something and upload it at a little bit later just to make sure that you can see the blocking and understand what I'm saying. So, again, whenever I do this, there's going to be a little bit of delay. So if you want to ask me a question in the live chat, then I will see it, but there will be a delay. And I think I'm actually buffering a little bit more today. So it may take a little bit longer than usual, but I will get back to you. And like I said before, if it's if it seems to be unwatchable, um, then I'll do it again. I promise. So I see Holly and Devora, Teresa. So it's so nice to see you. And it's like hard to believe that this is the last clue. But I'm really excited for you all to see your shawls. And I really love the edging on this one. And I hope you will too. So I'm just going to get started. I'm going to go through the clue and then talk a little bit about some of the new stitches that are showing up in this clue and how to block your shawl. So here we go. Just transitioning over. Alrighty. So this is the last clue. Oh my God, I can't believe that went so fast. Um, anyway, okay, so this is all worked in color 2 again. And there are two charts. There's a chart I and a chart J, and then we have a little finishing area here. So I do have the stitch count at the end of chart I, and then for chart J, I always give the stitch count right before the bind off row, just to keep from confusing things. But on the bind off row, you'll see that we're going to increase a few stitches on there. So I'll take you through that. And then the finishing, we're going to take a look at that little cast on loop, and hopefully you still have your pin in there. I do. I have a little tiny miniature shawl that I'm going to show you how to block. And I'm going to show you how to use blocking wires with straight pins, T-pins. Okay, so there are a couple of new symbols for the chart. So there is a CDI, centered double increase, and there is a knit 3 and a knit 2 into yarn over. And so those are used on the last chart. So on the one on the chart I, that those symbols are about the same as what we've been doing before. So let's take a look at chart I. So I think the biggest thing about this chart is up here where I'm getting ready to do the very edge. So up until now, you've had that 3 stitch spine here. And in order to get it ready to do the edge, I have moved 1 stitch out to either side. So visually you can see what it looks like to have this one spine coming up the middle here. And it's still going to look basically the same until you get up to the next to last row, right side row, which is row 7. So it's going to, so what this does is set this center up right here to look like this area right about here. So this spine right here is going to mimic, and the very center stitch here is going to turn into a yarn over. So it does actually exactly mirror the stitches over to the side here. So couple of other things. If you take a look here, you can see that there are some no stitch symbols in here. So that is because I'm adding a couple of stitches in for each repeat. And even though it seems like that's going to make the shawl flare out, what it's actually going to do is enable you to pull these points out more from the edging and make them actually pointier. So I did not, I have blocking photos in here behind this page here, little warning page. I'm not going to show you the photos, but if you want to take a look at them, you'll be able to see what I mean. So those added stitches right in this area here are going to help you have more fabric right in this little pointy section. And you can see down here, this is the continuation of kind of the pointy section on the side. So that's going to allow you to have more material, and you'll be able to pull this farther away from the bind off edge of the shawl. So it will enhance the scalloped edge. And because there is this little area right at the spine here that is mimicking the rest of those points, this spine is also going to look pointed. So you can see on here that I have stopped adding extra stitches to the spine. So the shaping is a little bit different here. So I've added one stitch per right side row up until I get to row 7, and then there's an extra 2 stitches added instead of 1 here. And then down here, we're taking a look at chart J. Even though I messed up, this says chart but it's actually J. Sorry about that. So I should actually just mark that, because if I keep showing that, it's going to be confusing. So you can see here, like basically across here, there are no more increases. So lace is kind of a fun thing because you can actually put extra increases in rows and then put no increases in after that. And when you block it out, you'll smooth out those edges and you won't be able to tell. So because it's knit at kind of a loose gauge, you'll be able to just kind of mess with those increases, and when you block it out, it will look beautiful. Don't worry. Hopefully, if you're nervous about how it's going to look, you can take a look at the last page, though I'm warning you for the spoilers. It turns out really pretty. I'm really happy with it, and I hope you are too. Okay, so once we get past these extra increases here, so each repeat increases from 10 stitches up to 12 stitches. And that's going to give a lot of leeway going into this last chart here. So we'll be able to pull that around and kind of mess with it. Okay, so there are no new stitches in this chart I, but in chart J, there are. So the first thing I want to show you is, I know this looks lopsided because on the right-hand side, there's a 21 repeat, and on the left side, there's a 20 repeat. So the reason for that is that this is actually the center stitch right here. So this is your center stitch, and this needed to be taken out of both repeats because it doesn't quite match. So it doesn't match on row 3. So you can see across here, because I have mirrored the knit one through the back loop and the SSK, this repeat here doesn't fit. So when you're looking in the written instructions, you'll see that some of the written rows have 21, like row 1 shows that you're going to repeat each of those 21 times. And then when you move on to row 3, you'll see here that it's 20 times and 21 times here. That is correct. So that's not an error. That is because this row 3 is just a little bit different because it's kind of in the center. So let me just check. I love that you all had a great time with this. I'm kind of sorry to have this come to an end. And Holly, I am like really into Gothic architecture. Can you tell? Probably. Okay, so I'm going to show you how to do the CDI here, and then I'm going to show you how to bind off. So the bind off is can look like it's a little bit tricky because you're going to be knitting 2 stitches into each of the yarn overs that surround the CDI. And I can show you how to do that. Because we're binding off after each stitch, you can actually knit a bunch of stitches into a yarn over instead of having to do a knit one, purl one to a yarn over. Okay, so let's take a look here at the CDI. So I'm going to do the yarn over. So a CDI makes it look like you have like a twisted stitch on the bottom, and I think it's really nice instead of just like a more open stitch. So in a CDI, you're going to increase 2 stitches. So the first stitch is going to be a knit through the back loop, and you're going to keep that stitch still on the needle, yarn over, and now you're going to come around to the front and knit through the front. So it's an increase of 2 stitches, and this is what it looks like. So you can see it does look very centered instead of having the added stitches off to one side. So it's nice for this type of lace. Okay, so I'm just going to work to the end here and show you how to bind off. So I'm not following the pattern here. I'm just going to show you my favorite stretchy bind off. So as I was saying before, this is the bind off row. This chart shows all right side rows except for this last row here. That's row 6. And you're going to be working that from left to right and binding off as you work the stitches as shown across here. So this is all knitted, and you're going to, at right where this 3 is, you're just going to knit, that's just knitting 3 stitches. So it's right above the CDI. In order to make this fit onto the same chart properly, I just put a 3 above here. So you're going to work 3 stitches. You don't work them together. You just work them separately. And then 2 stitches are going to be worked into the yarn over next to that CDI. Okay. So here is my favorite bind off. So my edge here is knit through the back loop. So I'm just going to knit 2 stitches through the back loop. And to start this bind off, they're going to go back onto my left needle. And I'm just keeping my needle here in the back so I can knit these two together through the back loop. And there comes my stitch. So that's 1 stitch bound off. So every time you add another stitch, it's going to go back over here to your left needle and you're knitting 2 through the back loop, knitting 2 together through the back loop. So this is really like decreasing out rather than binding off because you're never passing any stitches over. So you're just decreasing to bind off and it's super stretchy. I've never seen anybody be able to bind this off and using this bind off too tight. So you don't have to worry about loosening up or anything when you're binding off. You don't have to go up in needle size or do anything special, even if you are a super tight knitter and you have problems with tight bind offs. This one is nice and loose. Okay, so I've come to a yarn over and then the 3 stitches in the middle from the CDI and then another yarn over on the other side. So this is, I'm going to work the 2, the number 2. So I'm going to knit 1 into my yarn over and I'm going to keep my yarn over on my left needle. And now these 2 stitches are going to go back onto my left needle and I'm keeping my right needle in there and knitting 2 together through the back loop. And you can see my yarn over is still on my left needle. Now I'm going to dip back in again and do the second stitch. That is my second knit stitch. And back they go onto my left needle. And I'm going to knit 2 together through the back loop. And so now I'm just right here to my 3 stitches, the CDI. And basically what this does is give you just a little bit of an extra area where you can pin out when you're pinning this out to block. So I'm just going to knit these 3 stitches one by one and bind them off. So nothing special there. Each one of these is knit individually. Okay, so those 3 are bound off. Oops, I think I split the yarn there. Okay, so now I'm back to my my second yarn over here, and I'm going to show you what this looks like if I were an English style knitter and I held the yarn in my right hand, just in case it's a little confusing. So I'm going to knit 1 stitch here, and I'm keeping my yarn over on my left needle, and I'm going to put those 2 stitches back onto my right needle, sorry, onto my left needle, and my right needle is still through the back. And now I'm just going to knit those 2 together through the back loop. And now I just need 1 more stitch in this yarn over. So 1 more knit stitch. And I can take it off of my needle. And now these 2 stitches go right back onto my left needle with my right needle in the back. And there we have So it's going to look a little bit loose when that first comes through there, but don't worry about that. As you go on, it's going to look much better. So once you've knit the next stitch, you will hardly even notice it. So you can see here what that little edge is going to look like. So this is where you're going to be putting pins or blocking wires when you pin it out. Okay, so that was the last, that was the bind off row. So that was the information here for this bind off row. And now let's talk a little bit about blocking. Um, so here's my little mini shawl. It has some of the same stitches as the mystery, but not all of the same. So it looks pretty pathetic right now. And some of you, depending on what type of yarn you have used, you will notice that your shawl can look like pretty bad, anywhere from really terrible to fairly okay. So mine looks kind of terrible because this is actually this is like a sock yarn that I used, and it's it's very stretchy. It has a lot of memory to it, and so it's trying to kind of bounce back into shape. So I'm going to show you how to block it, um, but I'm not going to wet it first because that would just be inviting problems. I know that I would knock water all over the place. So I'm just going to show you how to do this when it's dry. Okay, so the only thing that I like to sew in before I block is this little cast on area here where I have my pin. So I still have my pin. That was for my cast on loop. Um, I'm just going to kind of take a look here and see how this looks on this side here. So if you like the way that looks, and basically if it blends in, then you can go ahead and sew that cast on loop in. It may be too tight, so let me tighten this back up and show you what I mean by that. So you may have something like this. So even though that's really tight, it's making a pinhole here. I like to loosen that up so that it blends completely, like all the way across with all of the other yarn overs on the side. So once you have that adjusted to the way that you like it, go ahead and sew in that tail, and then you can just give your shawl a wash. So I like to use wool wash, and I like to rinse thoroughly and completely. I've had some interesting things happen when I didn't rinse it out properly. Um, so you definitely just want to get it all out of there because it can affect the color by oxidizing. So it doesn't always happen, but it happened once to me, and I will never forget. So so the other thing that I want to warn you about, if you are using naturally dyed yarn, so for instance, if you have one of the A Verb for Keeping Warm kits, that is a naturally dyed yarn, and you need to do a little bit of a test with your T-pins ahead of time to make sure that your T-pins are stable. Some of the T-pins have some like imperfections in the plating, and it can cause your yarn to change colors where the T-pin sits. So my suggestion is just to take a couple of your T-pins, wet a piece of your yarn and just wrap it around and let it dry and see if it changes the color. So with natural dyeing, iron can be used as a mordant. So that's why you want to make sure that your T-pins will keep your colors color fast. So just a little bit of test beforehand. Okay, so once you have this all set out to your likings, go ahead and give it a wash, completely rinse it thoroughly, and then I always roll mine up in a towel and walk on it to get all of the extra water out. Yes, Devora, you were saying also test the water before washing. Yes, if you have used Definitely, if you have used naturally dyed yarns, the water can have an effect as well. So you want to use the same water, same soap, same T-pins and everything. Just give it a little test before you pin out your shawl. Okay, so I'm just going to pretend that this is damp and I'm about to pin it out. Okay, so I like to use little blocking mats. So I'm just going to put my blocking mats out here. Got to move everything over a little bit so I don't want to make everything crash down. So what I like to do is I like to line the shawl up along one of the creases and then sort of use a grid system to make sure that I block it out evenly. So in this particular case, I am only using two blocks, two tiles, but when I blocked the larger shawl, I used a lot more. So, okay. So the first thing I'm going to do is just get my blocking wires. So I use TIG welding wires and TIG welding rod, and this is pure stainless steel. I think it's about a 14 gauge, and I got it from Ace Hardware. And they aren't plated, so they're really good. These have lasted me probably about 20 years, possibly more. And they don't rust, they don't pit, and I've never had them like change the color of any naturally dyed yarn. So, okay. So I'm just going to, I always start along the top and I like to weave in and out along the edge. So any place that you want to have a straight edge, you want to weave in and out fairly close together because anytime you only choose, like if I were only to get this one little area here, that would become a point. So what I'm trying to do is reduce the number of points along the edge and make sure that it's nice and straight. So weaving in and out. And then I have come to my favorite part. So this is the reverse I-cord bind off. And I love having these on my shawls because I can just put my blocking wire right through that tube. So you can see here, it's just going straight through my tube right across. So on your shawl, it's probably going to be too long for you to put one blocking wire all the way through here. So it's fine to have a couple of them, even 3 across the top. Just when you pin it out, make sure that you pin it straight across so that you're not going to get any points, and you will be fine. Okay, so I'm going to continue along the side here. And I don't generally sew in any of my ends until the very last step because I don't want to make anything too tight. And because this lace is knit at a loose gauge and I'm going to stretch it a lot when I block, I want to make sure that I have enough leeway. I don't want any of these ends to be too tight. So these are still, as of yet, they are still not sewn in. They're just sort of floating about out there. Okay, so I have my top is done. And now I'm going to tackle the sides here. So the scallops on the side actually make it much easier to block. Believe it or not, they look really decorative, but they make it so much easier to block. So I'm just going to grab each scallop along the side here and thread my blocking wire all the way through here. So sometimes I actually, when I do these scallops, I just use the blocking wire as sort of a gauge of where I want them to be pinned out. And then later on, I pin them out. I get everything nice and even, and I pin them out and then take the blocking wire out. But this time I'm just going to leave these in. I put in all of my blocking wires before I pin it out. Okay. So this is basically what I end up with when I have a larger shawl. So I have this lined up along my crease here, and I'm going to start in the middle and put my first pin in right in the middle. So I have my triangle here, the tip of my triangle is all lined up, and now I'm just going to pull that down. Let me give myself a little bit more room here. I'm just going to pull it down and place a T-pin at the very tip. So this is what it looks like. And nothing is blocked out quite yet. It's just that center. Okay, so now I'm going to start pulling out from the side here. So I want to kind of use my grid and pull it out the same on both sides. So right now I'm doing each tip, each side. So let me show you what this looks like. That's what it looks like. So that's the top part. And then you can see over here to the side. Okay. Let me just put that back in my holder. So once that's done, I have sort of this bottom one has kind of come loose a little bit. So when this is wet, it's both stretchier and it's also stronger. So when you're pulling this, you can pull really hard and it will be completely fine. So your fabric will stand up to pulling hard, even though it looks kind of delicate because it's lace. Okay, so I tend to work both sides at once. So in other words, I'm going to put a pin on one side and then put a mirror and have my pins going across the top. You want to make sure that you get, when you're pinning this top part here, you want to make sure that your pin is below your blocking wire that's going through this I-cord. And you can stretch this really hard. So one of my test knitters used to actually put weights alongside on the mats when she blocked because she stretched it so hard. So some people will say it's like blocking it thuggishly. So I'm just going to make sure that this is all even. And the great thing, another great thing about this is when you're using these blocking wires, if you stretch a little bit and then you find that you want to stretch it more or you want to even out or something like that, all you have to do is just unpin a little bit and stretch and then repin it instead of having to pin each single one of these scallops out by itself. So once you like the way it looks, you can just let it sit there. You want to make sure that it dries completely and totally. So let me show you this again. You want to make sure it's totally dry. So you can see here everything pinned out. Now, if you decide that you don't like, you can see here where that it kind of goes in the front and out the back of that scallop. If you don't like that, you can also put your pins in for each scallop. So once this is all set up, you can put a pin in at each scallop. And then once you're finished with that, you can take out your blocking wire. So let me just get those in there for the scallops and I'll show you what I mean. So say I don't like the way that looks. So now I have my pins in at the scallops here. I can just take my blocking wire out. But my blocking wire was really good to have there because now I didn't have to readjust every single pin. I could put them in at the end when I knew I really liked it. So Jill asked if the wires are bendy. They are a little bit. So they're not a flexible blocking wire, but I can show you, like they do bend enough so that I can kind of pull them out just a little bit. But they're straight. So like they wouldn't be called flexible blocking wires, but just because they're metal, they do actually have some flex to them. Okay. Okay, so once that is done, once your shawl is all blocked out, so let's take a look at this. I'm just going to unpin this. Um, you want to, the other thing you want to make sure to do is you get to choose what shape you want to block it in. Don't let your shawl choose for you. You want to block this into a triangle. So just block it straight across the top, like I showed you, and it will be a triangle, even though there are some interesting different increases in there. So the increase scheme was not like for every right side row in several places, but that does not matter because you are the boss of your shawl. Okay, so let's take a look here. So on this little sample here, on the side, remember I was talking before about leaving a loop just to make sure that you really like your color. So I left a loop here, and before I start to sew in these ends, I'm just going to cut it. So I'm cutting it in the middle and leaving enough room to be able to sew in my ends. And you can see along the side here that this is a little bit loose. When you sew in your ends, don't worry about it. You can adjust it to make sure that it is exactly how you want it to be. Alrighty, so now we are to any questions or anything. Does anybody have any questions? Is there anything you would like me to go over? Um, I'm not going to show you the sewing in. at this point, but later on I will put up a tutorial if you would like me to do that. So let's see. I'm just going to transition back over. I'm kind of trying to make this a little bit faster because I can see the the thunderstorms coming on over the mountain, and I don't want to lose you completely. And usually the lightning strikes the tower right around where I live. So I want to wind up, like so far I've had fairly good luck. So I wanted to make sure that I keep my good luck. Um, so tomorrow on the 20th, of River Keeping Warm is having a Zoom get together. And if you had any other questions or anything, you can come ask me there. And also, you can just write to me and ask me. I can add extra tutorials and stuff like that. I am actually going to upload a tutorial on sewing in ends. It's kind of close work because uh, it's harder to see with the video quality that I'm getting right now. So I want to make sure that I'm going to upload one that's nice and clear for you. So let me see. Yes, Barb, I totally will. I will actually do that this evening and then I'll upload it into the same playlist. And it's really hard to see with this crappy video quality. So hopefully by the time I do this, I'll be able just to upload it and I will have the 5G back. So let's see. Has anyone used aluminum rods? I think aluminum would be fine, but I would still test it just to make sure that there's not something extra in there that you don't know about, because metal does tend to be contaminated, and sometimes something just sort of gets in there and you don't know about it. It's just like part of the manufacturing process. So definitely just whatever you're going to use, if you're using natural dyes, just test it out beforehand and it should be fine. So if you do find that your natural dyes do react, then what you can do is take just like a piece of kitchen twine, like white twine or something like that, and run it through the points and block it out that way um, without touching any metal to it. So there are ways to get around that. And so let me see. I am so happy that you guys have enjoyed it. Thank you for hanging out and knitting along with me. And I really hope you join me again next year. It's so nice to see you all. I'm just kind of looking at the comments and really appreciating you. Um, so I will upload another video and then you'll be able to see better how to weave in your ends. And I may even put a little bit of extra blocking stuff in there. We'll see if you have any questions or anything. Thank you so much. And don't forget to put your shawls up so I can see, because I love seeing your shawls and all your beautiful colors and all of that. I've actually been lurking a lot and looking at all of your shawls are so beautiful. So hopefully you love them as much as I love them. So thank you so much. Let's see a couple of other questions. Okay, just wanted to make sure. So thank you again. Take care, everybody. And I hope to see you really soon. Don't be shy. If you have any questions or anything, just let me know. And I will get back to you and answer them. And it's probably a question that someone else has had too. So I like to post things as answers. So just let me know. Take care and thank you so much for joining me. I hope to see you again next year and hopefully before then too. So take care, everybody. Happy knitting, and I will talk to you soon. Bye bye.